Okay, we will now call to order the regular meeting of the Marin Local Agency Formation Commission today, Thursday, April 30th, 2020 at 7 p.m. This is by virtual teleconference only pursuant to the provisions of California Governor's Executive Order N2920 issued on March 17th, 2020. This meeting will be held by teleconference only. No physical location will be available for this meeting. However, members of the public will be able to access and participate in the meeting. Okay. Please, we'll do the roll call. Who's going to do the roll call? Jason?
I take care of roll call and stuff.
Okay.
Roll call, Sashi McEntee.
Here.
Craig Murray.
Here.
Damon Conley.
Here.
Judy Arnold.
Here.
Barbara Kohler.
Here.
Lou Cayes.
He's still connecting to his audio.
Okay, we'll come back to that in a second. Larry Loader.
Here.
Alternate members, Dennis Rodoni.
Here.
Todd Moody.
Here.
Chris Skelton.
Present.
James Campbell.
Here.
All right, we have a quorum of the board.
Okay, and did you want to check back in with Lou?
Lou, I'm not seeing audio, or I'm not seeing audio for you at all. I see
On my screen, he says he's still connecting on my screen, so
okay.
He's a little delayed.
Okay. All right. Thank you for calling the roll, Jason. We will now move to agenda review. Does anyone want to remove or rearrange any items?
Madam Chair, I would recommend moving up on the agenda the item for the one file application number 1347, yep. Item number 4, as we have a member of the public who wishes to speak on that matter.
Okay, so you're proposing that we switch 4 and 5 essentially?
Correct.
Okay. Would anyone like to make a motion to that effect?
So moved.
Second.
Moved and seconded. All in favor? Oh, we're going to do a roll call vote.
Yep, roll call vote. Sashi McEntee.
Can I just
Aye.
mention? Can I just
Yes,
mention
Barbara.
something? James is the alternate, so I don't think he can move.
Correct. We won't be calling his name in roll call votes.
But did he make the motion?
He did it.
Oh, good point.
Okay.
How
We need
about I
someone else.
make the motion?
All right. Motion's been made and seconded. Sashi McEntee.
Aye.
Craig Murray.
Aye.
Damon Conley.
Aye.
Judy Arnold.
Aye.
Barbara Kohler.
Aye.
Lou Cayes. Larry Loader.
Aye.
Motion has been made and passed unanimously.
My apologies, but was there any public comment on the agenda review?
Seeing
Jason, was there
none.
any public? Okay, seeing that. Okay, moving on. We will move on to public open time. This portion of the meeting is reserved for persons desiring to address the commission on any matter not on the current agenda. All statements that require a response will be referred to staff for reply in writing or will be placed on the commission's agenda for consideration at a later meeting. Speakers are limited to 3 minutes. Jason, do we have anyone for public open time?
We have no comments by email, and I'm seeing no hands raised in the forum.
Okay, then we will move on to consent. There are 3 items on consent. Does anyone want to pull any items from the consent calendar? Seeing none, is there any public comment on the consent calendar?
No emails, no hands raised.
Okay. Would anyone like to make a motion on the consent calendar?
Yes, Craig, I'll move it.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Roll call vote, please, Jason.
Sashi McEntee.
Aye.
Craig Murray.
Aye.
Damon Conley.
Aye.
Judy Arnold.
Aye.
Barbara Kohler.
Aye.
Lou Cayes.
Aye.
Larry Loader.
Aye.
Motion passes unanimously.
All right, we will move on to, with the amended agenda, we'll move on to item number 5, approval of the resolution number 20-09, annexation of 1501 Lucas Valley Road to Marin Municipal Water District, which is LAFCo file 1347. Jason, staff report, please.
Sure. You may recognize this application under a different number. This was originally application number 1324. You may remember last December that its renewal needed to be done, and we did not receive a renewal note request from the applicant. So the based on LAFCo code, we had to deem it terminated at the time. Since then, the applicant has resubmitted. The main issue that kept the applicant from being completed and finalized, the commission had originally approved it, was an agreement between the applicant and MMWD to get where water could be served and how water could be served on the parcel. It is a single family home, but it is an agricultural area. It's 60 acres in size. MMWD was concerned about the 60 acres in size, not knowing what could potentially be done there. So they were requesting a condition be put that approval was done only for the applicant to be able to use water for the single family home, the residential part of the parcel, and not to be able to use water for some future agricultural use, since they didn't know what that agricultural use would be in the future. The applicant doesn't have any agricultural needs right now, but was looking simply for the single family home. They have come to agreement. There is an agreement that we have now signed in our possession around the that stuff, and that was the only condition that we needed for approvals last time. It did not occur. Now that they have occurred, staff is recommending support for this application. It makes sense. It helps them get good clean water out of this from the MMWD system for the residents of that parcel. The applicant is on the system and will be able to make public comment when time comes, but is also available for any questions you may have of them.
Okay. Mala, remind me, do we let the applicant speak before we open the public hearing or after or during that part?
You can either open the public hearing and then have the applicant speak first. I'm not sure that anyone else is participating as well.
Okay. Before we open the public hearing, are there any questions for staff from the commission? Okay, seeing none, I will open. Oh, Craig?
Yeah. So
Vice Chair
this
Murray?
might be for Mala, just in regards to preserving the ag space. That's one of our goals in LAFCo. Do we have to make any sort of affirmative statement on that, Jason or Mala?
Are you looking for like a land use policy? I'm not sure. Or is more like a principle statement?
Probably more like principles that it's meeting up with our LAFCO principles of maintaining the agricultural area.
I think this application does do that.
Okay, that's good.
Okay, any other questions for staff? Okay, seeing none, I'm going to open the public hearing and we'll start with. Oh,
Chris had a
sorry about
question.
that. Chris, go for it, Chris.
Quick question, it's a little tangential. Was there any discussion about 1499 Lucas Valley? I see it's one of the only other developed parcels. It's on the same side of the street. It's also not served or within MMWD's jurisdiction. More a question for staff and maybe the applicant as well, if there's an economy of scale, or I know when we're talking about sewer extensions or expanding sewer districts, sometimes these type of issues come up.
To be fair, this application really came in long before I was ever with Marin LAFCo, the original application, so I don't know what all the discussions were that occurred back then. I kind of pushed it forward that all those things were dealt with prior because the commissioner had already really approved this application, just wanting that one condition to be met before it gave final approval. So I don't know about the neighboring policy. Perhaps when the applicant speaks during public comment, they can answer that question for you.
Okay, any further questions from the commission before we open the public hearing? Okay, seeing none, we'll open the public hearing and Andre, I'm not sure how to pronounce your last name, sir.
Swang.
Swang, Mr. Swang, would you please begin and give us your statement?
I don't have a lot to say. I guess this has been in process for 6 years. I had hired a contractor to handle this, and he's the one who dropped the ball in December. I was shocked that it had been dropped after that point, so I took it from him personally, met with MMWD very successfully, and got a acceptable agreement to do that. Las Colinas Sewer had already accepted it years ago, and it actually, I think it's my understanding that the neighbor 1499 is on municipal water because there are no extensions here. Everything is right in front of the property.
Okay. All right, and are there any other comments for the public hearing?
No other comments were received, and I see no hands raised.
Okay. Seeing none, we'll close the public hearing, bring it back to the commission. Does anyone have any questions for the applicant or for staff?
I'll move resolution 2009.
No second.
Okay. Jason, will you call the roll?
Sure. Sashi McEntee,
Aye.
Craig Murray,
Aye.
Damon Conley,
Aye.
Judy Arnold,
Aye.
Barbara Kohler,
Aye.
Lou Cayes,
Aye.
Larry Loader.
Aye.
We have unanimous consent.
Okay, motion passes. Thank you, Mr. Sawang, for attending the meeting and for giving us your statement. And the motion carries.
Thank you very much for all your assistance. Have a good evening.
Thank you. You too.
Good night.
All right. Good night. We will move on to back up to item number 4, adoption of proposed operating draft budget fiscal year 2020-21. Jason.
All right. The budget committee met. It elected Lou Cayes as chair. So before I get into my presentation, I will always yield to the chair of the committee to make any comments they wish.
I will just say that we had lots of engaged and lively conversation regarding the budget. I think that we finally came to a consensus about what we want to do, which is what you're going to report on, Jason. And I think we made good progress. So just with those opening comments, you can go ahead and make your presentation about the items of the budget.
Okay. Thank you, Commissioner. So the staff report that I will give is the goal that I took into this based on our workshop that we did at the beginning of the year was that we wanted a status quo budget, that we were happy with where LAFCo was going, that we weren't looking to do anything big or different than what our current game plan is, and that we should have a budget that matched that. So the other goal that I had was not to look to do my best to not increase our dues that we require of our member agencies to pay LAFCo so we can do all of this work. The original draft budget that I did, I should mention, was done before any of the COVID-19 activities occurred. So everything that I did was 100% status quo. I was able to figure out how to balance our budget without raising member fees for any of our agencies. And so I presented to the budget committee a status quo, everything exactly the same. Some individual line items change to the degree you want me to get into those individual line item changes, I can. They're all reported in the staff report. I can go into more detail if any of you have questions on that side. During the budget committee, the main part of the discussion was COVID-19 has occurred. This is having an impact on some of our member agencies, particularly the county and cities and towns. And so perhaps we should look at a way to reduce our requests to them to help them during their economic times for the next fiscal year. But how do we do that without reducing our own fees or our own workload? And because of prior to me being here, there were a couple of years where we had lower than expected staff levels. We had some money that was saved up on this matter. So we have some money that was set there. You will see later in the report, we're going to have a discussion about the budget committee wanting to look at our reserves and how all that works. But one of the things that the committee decided was that they wanted to do a 10% reduction to our member agencies for this year. And so that is what the proposal that I put together was to do just that, and to have a 10% reduction without reducing. Since we have those leftover funds from the years prior, we don't have to cut anything this year. We can still cover it. It does mean in the future that as we're looking to do some major reports, which is quite possible, particularly around fire services, and some of the cities are looking at consolidation of services, that we may need to do some special reports there and bring in some outside consultants because of the specialized nature of those activities. So that could potentially impact our ability to do as many of those types of activities in the future if we do that 10% reduction. So that is everything that I have presented to you today, and I'm happy to take any questions if any commissioners have them.
Vice Chair Murray, you have your hand raised.
A couple things. So these are, looks like 2 special accounts, reserve accounts being set up. So
that is a different line item. That is a different subject matter for later in the agenda that the budget committee wants to do. That is separate from the approval of the budget.
Okay, so on the budget itself, last year we were compressing the chart of accounts. Jason, have you seen any issue with that, or is that working out well?
I'm sorry, what was it? Can you repeat the question again?
The accountant talked about compressing our line items, our chart of accounts, to roll them up into larger areas. Just curious how that's going.
Oh, that went perfectly fine. That was actually something that I suggested and the accountant and our auditor were fine with. That has worked out perfectly fine. There's only one small thing I realized we should probably do, and that's rename our communications line item to IT and communications, because now that we have our new phone system, our IT and communications are much more interconnected. So it's more properly labeling that line item, but I think everything else has worked perfectly fine in that system. It makes it easier to budget. It gives us the ability to have a little more flexibility within areas. So we're not like, oh wait, we're going over on this small little thing by a few dollars, but we know we're under this other one. By putting them together, it makes it easier to function as a budget.
Hey, Jason, I want to add one more comment that I thought you were going to mention, but I'll add to it. Just as an explanation for the 10% reduction, Commissioner Rodoni and Commissioner Kohler, representing the county and the cities, frankly convinced me that their areas of representation are going to be under some budget pressures because of the COVID-19, and there were going to be cuts there as a result of that. And the reason we did the 10% reduction was just to kind of share in that process and show some sensitivity to those parts of the county government that would be required to make cuts. And so this is a one-time, 1 year kind of cut in the assessments, again, to kind of share the misery and to show sensitivity to the overall county government situation.
I guess I would follow up on that. I think it's a point well taken, but then you look at the line items, particularly salary, it looks like there is anticipated a cost of living adjustment increase.
Of about 8%, it looks like.
And frankly, that is an issue that I think all agencies are grappling with, namely the likely foregoing of COLAs under the circumstances we find ourselves in. I'd like some comment on that.
Yeah, if I could just address...
Hold on, just a moment. Commissioner Kohler's had her hand up for quite a while. So if you, Barbara, if you want to say something, and then Jason, you can address the whole thing.
Yeah, and I want to say, so when we started the budget committee, obviously I was new to the budget committee, and I'm used to coming from a place working for the state of California where we not only didn't get COLAs, we had furloughs, we had staff layoffs. And so when we started the discussion, I raised the issue of, and I think in my short experience, the staff here does a wonderful job. So it's no reflection on staff work, but that we really ought to be looking at no increases or very minimal increases. And then I raised the issue, didn't we raise fees, because I had read something incorrectly. And then it went into this idea of a 10% reduction, which, and I apologize for this, thinking about it more, I don't know that that's the best way for us to kind of show solidarity and with what we're all going to be doing in our cities and town and the county. So I would prefer we look at really tightening our belts with things like increases, which will send kind of a bad message to the members that we serve. So I'm kind of torn on this because I know people attribute the 10% decrease in fees to me, but I've really thought about it long and hard, and I'm more on the same track with Damon on this. Thank you.
So I can address the salary line item specifically and the healthcare one. What I do, because I don't know what my salary, what we're going to negotiate at this point. I always put that salary line item for the April budget at the highest level I think it will ever be, just so we have a placeholder in there. Last year I did the same thing, and if you look at last year between the April and the June approvals, you will see that line item move down. So one of the things that I will always do is put in the April budget what is the highest level that it will be, so we have room to make sure we can, so we know what our budget does look like, and we have the ability to do that. So I don't anticipate that line item to really be an 8% increase. I do see there being some level of increase in there, hopefully. I mean, clearly I would like to see an increase. But we also have, one of the other things to remember is, and I don't know what the county is physically going to do, so if county members have an understanding of this, is we tie our other staff are all tied to a specific job description within the county system. So Jaron, who's currently our only staff member, his position is tied to a job code, and he is entitled to cost of living increases based on that agreement. And we've always followed that agreement. He also has the right, if he, based on job performance, to get a step increase. So I've left all of that ability into the budget to give us the flexibility to do that. Now, if the commission says we're not doing any increases this year for staff, that is a decision the commission gets to make, and staff will, do what staff needs to do to make that work, or, do other things as the case may be. So I just want to make sure that you're understanding that line item is the highest that we'll get, only because I want to make sure we're leaving room in there for anything that could potentially occur.
Okay. Sorry, Commissioner Moody had his hand up.
Okay, but if I can just follow up on my question, though.
Okay.
The dilemma being that we are voting on this and in effect, agreeing it could be that high. Yeah. So that, obviously I think the public rightfully will be on heightened alert about these issues. And again, no reflection on performance, but particularly top management and salaries throughout organizations. It's the first thing we're being asked. So I think even if we're on record as potentially improving an increase at this level is going to raise eyebrows. So I don't know if there's another way it can be brought before us or vote.
I think we let's just separate the issues out. It looks like we've got, most of us with our agencies are coming to our budget process and are considering a policy of freezing everybody where they are, no increases for the year, and freezing any open positions and not filling those positions. So that's what we're doing likely going to do at the City of Mill Valley, for example. So I think that would be an item for us to talk about here, is what do we think our policy is going to be. We do have an open position of commission clerk that Jason is looking to fill. I'm assuming, Jason, this is assuming that position would be filled. Is this budget
correct?
Correct. And also noting that the benefits number goes down by a third. I'm just curious about that.
Sure. As I mentioned in the staff memo, last year when we did the budget, we had no real understanding of what staff and benefits actually look like. I used a formula that the county gave me for a generic thing.
And it was just off? Okay.
Yeah, and the county version was just off.
Okay, fine. So that's a more realistic number. Okay,
yeah.
So I think we need to discuss what our policy is going to be as far as staff pay increases, also about the open position, whether we would like Jason to fill the position. I think it's a slightly different view of the world than some of the larger entities. We're a very small office, and kind of every person counts. So that's one issue. The second issue is where we are on fees. And I think Commissioner Kohler brings up a good point about, if you lower fees, it's kind of hard to raise them up again. So I think those are the two things that would be good for us to consider. Are there any further questions from the commission? And then we'll do public comment, and then we'll move back to deliberation. Okay, We've got a question from Dennis and a question from Craig and a question from Todd. Sorry, let's let Todd go first because he had his hand up before. Todd, Dennis, and then Craig.
Okay, just speaking for special districts, we just did our budget process, and we may have some reduced revenue, but we don't anticipate a large hit since our fees aren't really changing. And I imagine that the county has not changed our property taxes, so everyone's paying their property taxes. So, and the fees to LAFCo aren't really a big line item in our budget at all. So from a special district point of view, the LAFCO hit isn't really very big. So what we're doing, as far as special districts are concerned, I'm thinking it would only be symbolic that we, that we do things differently here. That's my comment. Thank you.
Okay, and then Dennis, and then Craig, and then we'll move into deliberations. Let's start. Keep questions, and then we'll move into deliberations. Go ahead, Dennis.
Yeah, I just wanted to make a couple comments, if I may. This is a draft budget that's to come back to us for approval later on, I think in a couple meetings. And the line items are just budget items. They're not commitments to spend the money, especially on salaries. We would have to make that commitment later on. And I think discussions around staffing would happen at the same time. So the fact that we approve this as a draft budget doesn't mean we are guaranteeing any sort of increases in any of the categories, or spending all the money in any of the categories. We can determine that as we go through the year. So I just wanted to mention that.
Okay, and Vice Chair Murray.
Yes, I think it'd be a really nice gesture. I did speak briefly with Jason, our executive officer, on this. If the office is closed during this COVID-19 period, and hopefully come out of it pretty soon, to hold that administrative position, if Jaren and Jason feel that they could handle the office with it being closed, then that's something to consider, and also provide us a little bit of time too to see our function in LAFCO and what we could do working with the executive officer and Jaren too, in terms of kind of recraft our needs and that position. So just want to put that out there for consideration.
Okay, any other questions before we go to public comment?
Just a quick follow-up. And again, what I'm getting held up on, I get it's a draft, but the fact is, if you look at the staff report, it specifically says on salary, this line item has been increased to allow for COLA and other possible salary increases that may occur after staff reviews are done. So let's say we vote yes. If you're a member of the public and are looking at the plain language of what we just did, even understanding the further discussion that we could change our minds, we've effectively endorsed the proposition that there are going to be salary increases in COLA adjustments. So I guess I remain uncomfortable with that without further discussion.
Okay, Commissioner Arnold, and then I think we'll do public comment, and then we'll move back into deliberation. Go ahead, Commissioner Arnold. Judy?
Okay. First of all, I don't think many people are going to go over the LAFCO budget might, or certain groups might. But I think that we could simply say, say something in the beginning of it by saying this is a proposed budget and we're going to be voted on it later, but this is what we're looking at now. And I agree with what Dennis said. So I think it's fine to go out like this, maybe with a little caveat at the beginning.
Okay, I see two hands raised. Are these deliberative comments or questions from Dennis and James?
Mine's a question.
Okay, James.
I'm just curious. I see that this the committee recommended this 10% reduction, and I'm not sure when to ask the question because we haven't come to the policy of reserves. But I see 20%, and I'm just curious how you came up with 20%. It's lower than we do in my city, and I'm just wondering if that money shouldn't be put into reserves as opposed to being returned or lowered at this time.
Okay, so yeah, we'll talk about the reserve policy later, but that's something we should consider. Okay, so let's stop there and see if there is any public comment on this item. Jason?
Madam Chair, we have no emails and no one has raised their hand from the public.
Okay, so seeing none, now we will deliberate. So if you would actually, first, let's have Mala clarify Dennis and Judy's comment about what approving this draft means. And then I would like the commission to discuss our policy on staff pay raises during this downturn, our policy on whether we freeze the commission clerk position or whether we keep that open. I suggest we should fill that. And then the third question of should we keep fees flat or reduce them by 10%? So let's start with Mala clarifying about what it means to approve this draft.
Sure. The LAFCo budget is a two-step process. Right now, it's just a draft that's before you. So if you approve it, you are just approving a draft. It will be renoticed again and come back before you, I believe, at the June meeting. Is that correct, Jason?
Correct.
And then at that meeting, it'll be the final budget that you will be taking action on. So that's when you can really, if you want to, modify numbers and have the exact figures in, for instance, on salary. So what is proposed in a draft can be significantly changed in the final, should you so desire. You're not locked in by what you do at the draft budget.
And if I can add one other thing to what Mala said, this is also our chance to send our budget out to all of our member agencies so they have the opportunity to comment on it, because it's their comments that are supposed to be what determine our final budget. So this is our opportunity for it to be out in the open, so all the other agencies get a comment on what we're doing.
That's good.
Okay, thank you, Mala. Commissioners, then let's deliberate on these three things, and then we can, given that, we can figure out how we feel about this budget. So given that this draft is going to go out to the member agencies, but we can make changes between now and June. Given that, what are your thoughts on staff pay raises during the downturn? Should we fill the commission clerk position, and should we keep fees flat or reduce them by 10%? Thoughts on those three items. Dennis.
Sure. I just want to remind the commission that by policy, our staff gets the same raise that the county gets. And currently our agreements with the county are to do a COLA July 1. We may change that, which would impact the LAFCo policy, but currently we're obligated by policy at LAFCo to follow the county's recommendation, which is currently contracted to be a COLA July 1. I think that's going to change, and I think Damon and Judy will agree with me. But currently, that's what we're actually required, and our policy has been at LAFCO to follow that. As far as I know.
County folks, when would that final decision be made?
It has to be negotiated with the union. So.
But by what date do we?
I'm not sure. I'm not sure.
Well, the budget is approved in June and takes place in July. I don't know what the date in June, but
in June that we would know whether or not the county. It probably wouldn't. It may not work out timing wise, right? I guess we would know whether the county is going to do COLA. So I guess Dennis's point is that we're obligated by our policy to do that part of the COLA. Commissioner Kohler has her hand raised.
So from what I understand, we have one staff person that would be subject to that. Management would not be subject to that. So my feeling is we ought to be looking at tightening our belt as far as staff increases to the extent feasible. And even though, and it should not reflect on anybody's performance, that's not what this is about. The second thing, as far as the 10% reduction, I know I voted for it, so I apologize to my colleagues on the budget committee, but I don't think that we should proceed with that at this point. I think it's a small gesture which says something to the member jurisdictions, but if we need it later, it'd be hard to get it back. And I think it's only $55,000. On the third thing, as far as filling the clerk's position, I'm not fully aware of everything that goes on in LAFCo, but I don't think we need a full-time clerk. And if we were to fill that position, and I know that there's some thoughts about looking at succession planning in the future, so hiring somebody that would be clerk/junior analyst, I still don't think you need a full-time position to staff LAFCo. And I know, for example, in the town of Fairfax, we're in succession planning for our senior planner, who's our only planner other than our director. And we have a part-time person who we're working towards that when our senior planner decides to retire. So I think there's different approaches we can take to have some salary savings. That doesn't mean that in the future that person, if we filled at a part-time level, couldn't necessarily be made full-time in the future. But I'm not sure that the level of work at LAFCo, given what I know about our city clerks, requires full-time work all the time. So those
Jason, you had your hand up to comment on that.
Yeah, no, I agree with you to a degree, Commissioner Kohler, that there is no need for a full-time clerk. That position really doesn't need to exist anymore anywhere, at least within the LAFCo world. The big thing that I want to keep in mind is we do have some of our fire districts looking to merge, and we have some of our cities looking to do some of their own stuff around merging of some of their services. So there could be a need for and I think that I'm almost positive that there will be a need, if you combine a junior analyst with the clerk, that you could potentially have to have a full-time person do both of those functions, because there's going to be a lot of research that we're going to need to do for the consolidation side of the merger of services, all that stuff that will be beyond what Jaron would be able to handle with the MSR process. So I do think that there's some need. I'm not 100% convinced there yet, but I think that there's a very good likelihood that there could be enough work to keep that person busy. I don't want to hire someone full-time if we don't have the work for them. That is definitely one of my goals. One of the other things to keep in mind is the budget line item that I have now, I kept it at what Candace's salary would be. Reality is we're not likely to hire someone who has 15 years of experience to be a junior analyst / clerk. We're probably going to hire a more entry-level person. So that position will be a lot cheaper than what we were paying Candace. Even though she was only part-time, she was still 35 hours, which was close to full-time. So I think that there will definitely be some cost savings in the salary line item at the end of the day once we get to that point in the process as we're moving forward.
The only thing I would add to that, though, is that as far as I recall our work plan, looking at shared services for what some in the county are interested in, and I know others are not, is not something that's currently in our work plan other than looking at consolidation of fire districts. So I guess I respectfully disagree that necessarily you have to hire someone full-time at this point, but I will leave my comments at that. Thank you so much.
Commissioner Rodoni, you have your hand raised.
You know
Dennis?
what? I'm really bad about lowering my hand, so sorry, I don't need to speak again.
Okay, no worries. All right, so does any other commissioner have any thoughts on those three items? Staff pay raises during this year, and again, underscoring Commissioner Kohler's comment that this has nothing to do with merit. All of us are belt tightening just to stay afloat. So that's one area, the commission clerk position, and keeping fees flat or reducing them. Any comments from any of the commissioners on those three items?
Yes, Sasha, I've got a few comments.
Okay.
First, back to Todd's point about the district, or the special districts. Todd, I originally had your same view of this. So you could have been repeating what I said at the beginning of the budget subcommittee meeting. And I will tell you that in spite of Barbara's reversal in her position, she and Dennis both made a sound argument about the reduction, I think, which is reinforced by what Damon has said. So I think having the reduction in the assessments is the right thing. It's the appropriate thing. And we are a member of the community, and we should be making that kind of reduction. So I personally, again, Todd, agreeing with and respecting your position and feeling the same, I think the reduction is appropriate, and we should do that. Back a little bit to Dennis's comment. This is a draft budget. I don't think we need to micromanage what the budget is tonight. We haven't even voted on the EO's compensation. We don't know what that's going to be, but what we are doing is establishing the way that we are going to be billing our clients, the districts and cities, for the services we provide, and they need that for their budgeting. And I think it's an appropriate thing for us to let them know what they should expect to put into their budgets. So I'm not as concerned about trying to micromanage each line item as maybe some others. And I think we can, get some of that extra refinement between now and when the official budget is put up for approval. So just some points to consider.
Okay, my thoughts on the fee question are, it's just generally not an easy thing to go back up once you've lowered them. I think you would have to, if we were going to lower fees, we'd have to make it some sort of discount that was to be applied that would be very visible. So there would be an indication that we would be kind of going back to business as usual the year after. I'm also echoing Commissioner Campbell's concerns about eroding our reserve. So my personal preference would be to just keep them flat and then try to do some belt tightening in our organization. Commissioner Connolly, your comments from before on the perception of putting out a draft budget with the salary increases, do you want to comment on that, given all this discussion?
Yeah, I mean, I think if we just add a huge asterisk to it, because again, I think just, as it circulates out in the community, which it sounds like it will by necessity, without some sort of explanation, that's going to be the first thing that people notice. And it's not going to be in a positive way. So I understand that we're leaving ourselves some flexibility. I would just add a big old asterisk with description. That this is subject to change and is draft form only. On the fees, I guess I'm of two minds as well. Ideally, we build in a fee decrease. On the other hand, it sounds like there's some sound arguments for essentially a status quo situation, particularly if we're wrestling with reserve levels. Obviously, at the end of the day, we want to be able to provide the level of service that the client agencies expect. So I guess I'm of two minds on that. I could go either way. I don't know if the group has a strong preference.
So let me make a proposal and see what you all think of it. I definitely agree, Commissioner Connolly, that the salary line item needs to have a footnote indicating that we have a policy of following the county COLA policy, and that it's subject to change. And then I would propose that we leave the agency contributions flat until later on in this particular meeting. We're going to talk about reserves. So let's do that. And then when we come to June, maybe we can make a final call on whether or not to cut the fees once we know what the salaries look like, and once we know kind of where everybody is on that. How does everybody feel about that proposal? We basically kind of go back to the status quo budget that Jason had originally with a footnote, and then we have a discussion about reducing fees in the June budget discussion.
I agree with that.
Okay, Commissioner Kohler, you have your hand raised. Barbara,
you're on mute.
I agree with that. I think the footnote that I believe Damon was referring to, so we only have one staff member that's subject to the MSERA negotiation. So I think the footnote should be clear that there should be a different footnote. It's really just, we're looking at, I don't know what the right wording is, but a different caveat than just that. But I would vote for that.
Okay. All right, if there's no further deliberation, does anyone
want? Not just following the county, that could be part of it, but that's not the only issue.
Okay, Jason, you had a comment?
Yeah, two things I need to add in there. Jaren is the only current staff person who falls in that. Remember, if we do hire a second staff person to replace Candace's position, that person also falls into that. So I just want to make sure it's clear that there are actually technically right now we have two positions that fall into that county following system. So I just want to make sure that that's clear. Second, I do want to get some clarification. I don't necessarily need to get it tonight, but I would want to get some clarification maybe from the Personnel Negotiating Committee on how we will handle. Jaron is entitled to a potential step increase if his job performance review goes well. I do job performance reviews between this meeting. Once you've done my review, I take that and do Jaron's review, and then come back at June with here's what our salaries are. So I kind of need to get some sort of idea as far as, are we following the county's policies and procedures? If Jaron gets a good enough review, he still gets a step increase, or is there something else I need to know? Because you're talking about freezing stuff, and all I've heard about is COLA. I want to make sure you're aware there is that other side for Jaron, which is he also potentially gets a step increase.
Okay, any comments on that?
I would just comment that if he passes his review, he should get a step.
Okay.
Okay. Okay. Yeah, Judy, what'd you say?
I agree. But he should get it if he passes.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay. All right. So that sounds like the commission is, no one is opposed to merit-based step increases. We're talking about COLA based on the economic downturn. Okay. So if there are no further deliberations, does anyone want to make a motion on basically on the status quo budget with a footnote explaining that 2 positions are subject to the MSERA COLA adjustments, and maybe an additional comment about salary is subject to change between now and June, and keeping agency contributions flat. And then we will bring that discussion back about a possible reduction in the June meeting. Would someone like to make that motion?
No motion.
Okay.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Jason, will you call the roll, please?
Sashi McEntee,
Aye.
Craig Murray,
Aye.
Damon Conley,
Aye.
Judy Arnold,
Aye.
Barbara Kohler,
Aye.
Lou Caius. Lou, you're muted.
On the basis of having been convinced that the 10% reduction in assessments is appropriate, I'm going to vote no on that.
Okay.
Larry Loader.
Aye.
On a 6-1 vote, the proposed budget has been approved. With the
Okay, so
everything else
just right. So to clarify, that means that this is the draft that will be distributed to the member agencies for comment. In June, we will approve the final budget. During that meeting and during that item, we will discuss whether to keep the fees flat or reduce them by 10% as suggested by the budget chair and the budget committee in the past there. So just to be clear, that's not the end of the discussion on that. And we will bring that piece back in June.
Okay.
Okay. This was a very, yes, Judy.
What, so when will we be discussing then replacing the clerk? We're going to, as I understand it from Jason, we're going to wait on that and he'll get back to us. Is that correct?
I think the idea was that Jason was going to go forward. Jason, will you clarify that?
Yeah, I mean, my goal is to move forward unless the commission tells me not to. I'm not going to hire anybody or have them start until the office is reopened, because one of the responsibilities of the clerk is to do the front office and answer phones.
Okay.
So until we reopen the office, I'm not going to bring anyone in. I haven't even put out a job announcement yet. So in all likelihood, it will be reopened before I get to that. Now, if the commission really wants to have a discussion about not hiring a third person, I want to have that discussion because there is some ramifications to workload of what we can accomplish. And I think we will be putting ourselves down a peg and not be able to accomplish everything we want to accomplish over the next year.
Well, that's why I asked for it. I don't think we should do that. I think you should go ahead and prepare for when we finally open.
Okay.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So just to clarify, that was my intention in packaging that proposal. Does anybody have? Does the commission generally agree with that we should fill the position commission clerk junior analyst, but not before we reopen? Okay, I'm hearing no objection, so I think the direction from the commission is that you can go ahead and proceed on that one. Okay. I think I just want to commend the commission for a really solid, educated, and nuanced discussion around this. Good job, guys, and really great job from the Budget Committee. I want to thank you guys for all your work there. Okay, so now we're going to move to the second budget-related item, the Budget Committee report on the reserve policy.
I apologize for changing the scenery here. Something's happened in my home network. I have 2 different office areas and 2 different computers, and they seem to be bouncing back and forth about which ones are connected and not connected. So in case you're wondering why there's an open window and a not open window and I'm moving, that's the reason for it.
All right. So our next agenda item is the Budget Committee report on updating current reserve policy and possible creation of a new reserve fund. As always, I will yield to the Budget Committee Chair if he wants to make any opening comments on it.
Commissioner Caius. Lou?
I think I'm back. Am I back?
Oh, there you are. Yep.
Any comments, or are you good? I'm going to take it as you're good or you're having internet issues. I don't know which. So what the Budget Committee, as part of our discussion about the budget, was we have a reserve policy that's been on the books for a few years now that's at 20% reserves. And that's our only reserve policy as it sits right now. So there were 2 different concepts that I came up with to have a discussion about our current funds. Just for full disclosure, as I am with anybody, when we were doing our budgets prior to me being here, the Local Agency Formation Commission was planning on there being 3 full-time staff. But as those of you who've been around for a few years know, we did not have 3 full-time staff. For a good portion of that time, for 2 or 3 years, we had 1.5 staff. So we built up a little bit of extra money sitting on the side and don't have anything designated for it. This has been part of our discussion that we had last year, moving into this year's budget, of what exactly do we want to do with it. So there are 2 different things that we want to have a discussion about. One is 20% the correct number to have for our reserve? I believe one of the commissioners earlier in the meeting was talking about that 20% number. Is that the correct percent? So the Budget Committee wants to review this. Technically speaking, what we're going to be asking for today is new policies or policy changes should go to the Policy Committee to review. But we do also have a custom and tradition that when a committee wants to review a policy that pertains specifically to that committee, that the committee be allowed, that other committee be allowed to do it. Last year, the Legislative Committee had a discussion about creating a policy of how we endorse bills in Sacramento because it directly impacted the Legislative Committee. The full commission took authority away from the Policy Committee and gave it to the Leg Committee to create that policy. So at the end of the day, what we're looking for is a similar courtesy to the Budget Committee here. That's what the Budget Committee is asking for, and with staff recommendation for that is to have the full commission say, Budget Committee, you look at our reserve policies and do that. So that's step 1. Step 2 is what reserve policies we have. There are 2 new reserve policies that staff is recommending we put into place. Because we have funds from the past for one of them, we wouldn't have any increases to our budget. We wouldn't have any increases to any of our member agencies. It is simply money that is sitting there right now, unused, and is technically not part of the reserve policy or part of the reserve fund. And that is money that would be utilized for future consultant work. We do know that we're going to potentially have fire agencies that are looking to merge. Some of them are city fire agencies. Some of them are special district fire agencies. Some of them fall under the county CSA or system. So it's all 3 groups that kind of make up LAFCo could potentially be part of this. So it might be a good use of funds to say, you know what, instead of going to each of these various agencies, why not let LAFCO be the place that actually runs this discussion? And
you guys mute while Jason is talking. But we're hearing a dog in the back.
Okay. If everyone can, I think that might have been Sashi's dog, and I think she just let him out the door.
Sorry about that.
Not a problem. So what I'm proposing to do is have the Budget Committee look at, should we create a special consultant policy reserve fund and put money that we currently have in our bank account that isn't earmarked for anything else and move that into that reserve fund, either all or some portion of it into that. We would need to set a bunch of rules and regulations, how we utilize it, what the rules are, all of that would come back to the full commission for a discussion. So that's new reserve 1, and then there's new reserve 2, which is our technology reserve. This is one you may, for those that have been around for a few years, may know a few years ago in 2017, we bought a whole bunch of new computers, and it was all bought at once. It was like a $20,000 bill. One of our discussions we've had as a full commission is wanting to try and keep a steady, easy to follow system for all of our member agencies. So we're not having these up and down curves in the budget. And so instead of doing a 20,000 year, 1 year budget line item increase, instead, can we smooth that out over multiple years? So one of the things that we're looking at doing is, instead of, right now you'll see a line item that's called technology fund in the budget line item. It's $4,500. We've spent 0 out of it this year, mainly because we don't need any new technology. Our computers are still working just fine. We haven't had a need for that fund or for that money. But what I want to do is every year keep that $4,500 or whatever the correct amount is. I currently have Marin LAFCo doing a kind of a full review of what would the cost be when the time comes to replace not just our computers or iPads, but our copiers and our printers and all the other technology stuff, and create a master, like, here's the cost, and figure out how much is it if we spread it out over, like, let's say 5 or 6 years. What does that amount up to each year? So we have a solid, even line item all the way through. When the time comes when we need to actually do some computer purchases, we have the money set aside. We don't have to do it, or any other IT technology related items. We don't have that stuff. We don't have a big bump in our budget and figure out how do we do it that year. We were reserving a little bit each year to smooth out everything, which I think is a good policy decision for us to have, and would be something that, once again, we need to set up a bunch of rules and regulations of how the money is used, when is it authorized, how do we pull money out of it. There'd be a bunch of stuff, and that would be something that the budget committee would, once again, just as they would with the other reserve policies, discuss, debate, bring back a potential proposal to the full commission, and the full commission at that point would then make a decision. Do these policies make sense, and do we want to utilize them? So that's the item that's in front of you today.
Okay, Lou, are you back?
I am back. I think.
Okay, great. And,
I think on this computer I'm back.
Any comments from you as budget chair?
The only thing I would say is to add is that we both felt that the reserve funds were reasonable, valid ways to deal with future budget issues, and I think all 3 of us supported it without too much hesitation.
Okay. And clarifying, Jason, on the different funds, these are just a way of us kind of allocating them, but they're not restricted funds. Is that correct?
That would be something that the committee would decide of what they would recommend to the full commission. So it could be a restrictive fund, it could be an unrestricted fund. That would be one of the decisions that would need to be made, and at the end of the day, the full commission would have to have a decision on how they wanted to do it.
Okay. Alternate Commissioner Campbell has a question.
You said, Jason, that you have money in the pot there to fund the consultant reserve. Do you also have money to fund the IT reserve?
It depends on how much money you wanted to put in the consultant fund. Yes, we could put all the money in there now, and we could reduce that line item and have that line item disappear for a few years. At some point, we would have to put that line item back in, though, because that's a long-term, I mean, every few years, you're going to have to replace your technology stuff. So that's something that we know is going to be a forever long-term thing. So the question comes, and the budget committee would have, and the full commission would eventually decide on, is, does it make sense to make that fund it all up front right now and take it out of the budget, with the realization at some point we're going to have to put it into the budget, where the consultant one may not be the same situation.
Okay, any other questions for staff on this item? Okay, seeing none, is there any public comment?
There is no emailed comment, and no one has raised their hand from the public.
Okay, so we'll move to deliberation from the commission. Commissioner Rodoni, you have your hand raised.
Just to quickly mention that if you allow us to go back and work on this, we'll establish what the maximum should be in each account, and it may not be fully funded initially, but we could fund it over time too. So there's a couple options there. We just come back with a recommendation, either to fund it now or to fund it over time. That's how we built the reserve up originally. The 20% was over a number of years we collected excess funds till we reached that maximum 20%. And James, if you want, we can look at whether that should be 25, which is probably a more normal amount, which would be 3 months operating fund. Thanks.
Commissioner Kohler?
Commissioner Kohler, you're on mute.
I know, I was getting there. I'm slow. I still have my right hand is impacted.
Oh, that's right. Sorry about that.
So I'm challenged. I would just say, you know, in Fairfax, we have a 25% reserve policy. So I think that, as Commissioner Rodoni said, and James kind of pointed to, we may want to revisit that while we're working on this, if it's decided that the Budget Committee would work on these policies. I will also say, in our town in Fairfax, when we were trying to build up enough money for a new financial software platform, we created something, we didn't call it a reserve fund or something like that, but we had a specific fund that we would feed over years till we got enough money for the software that we needed that was quite expensive. So I do believe that this is, I want to commend Jason for coming up with this idea. I think for both pots of money, as Lou said, we all agreed it was a good idea. And I would think the Budget Committee would be a good place to start working on these issues, since it's a little different than just general policy. It could certainly go through the Policy Committee after we take a crack at it. Thank you.
I would say it can't go through Policy Committee and Budget, because that would give you a majority of the board, and that would be a violation of Brown Act.
Okay, you're absolutely right. Thank you. But I would say the Budget Committee would be the right place for us to work on this. It involves our funds.
Is the plan that the Budget Committee would meet prior to the June meeting? Because I think that it'd be helpful to know what the target reserve amount would be before we vote on this budget and before we vote on potential changes in the fees or in the agency member fees.
Yes, if this gets approved.
I would say that I'm not sure that there would be time to do all that. I mean, I think we're going to have to do a few rounds on this.
Mm-hmm.
And I think if we can do a placeholder, I think that's your dog. I think if we can do a placeholder,
yeah.
You know, in our budget for this or some way, I think it's going to take more than one meeting to figure this out, I think. What do my colleagues on the Budget Committee believe?
I would think it makes some sense for us to have another meeting of the Budget Committee before the next full board meeting, so that we can refine some of these items based on what we're discussing tonight.
Yeah, just so everyone's aware, I was planning on talking to Commissioner Caius about another Budget Committee probably at the beginning of June, mainly because that would be after the comment period for our proposed budget. We should, in theory, if anyone comments on this from all of the agencies, the Budget Committee would then have a chance to review the revised budget, and we could at the same time have a discussion about all the policies on the same agenda.
Okay. So given that, Dennis, do you still want to talk, or is it?
Sorry.
Okay, there we go. All right. So so given that, any sorry, have we done public comment yet?
No.
Okay. Is there any public comment on this item?
Madam Chair, we have no emails, and I see no hands raised in chat.
Okay. Then moving on to that, is there any further deliberation? Does anyone want to make a motion?
I'll make a motion to approve setting up the 2 new funds and spending the time with the Budget Committee to refine those items.
Can I modify his, it's to authorize the Budget Committee to establish these policies and bring them back to the full commission for approval.
I stand corrected.
Second.
Okay, roll call vote, please.
Sashi McEntee.
Aye.
Craig Murray.
Aye.
Damon Conley.
Aye.
Judy Arnold. Commissioner
Aye.
Arnold, Barbara Kohler,
Aye.
Lou Kaez. Lou?
Is that me?
Yep.
Aye.
Larry Loader.
Aye.
All right, that motion is approved unanimously.
Excellent. Continued excellent work by our budget committee.
Just
Okay.
as a question, Jason. For the county representatives, did you have Dennis and Judy and Damon all vote?
I did not have Dennis vote. He is not, he's the alternate member, so I'm not calling on him.
Okay, okay, got it. I knew one of them must be alternate. So I didn't remember which one was getting an alternate and not voting tonight.
Dennis is our alternate for the year.
Okay.
Okay, we'll move on to the executive officer report, Jason.
Sure. In your packet, you have the budget update, and I need to actually apologize. I realize on the budget, it's on the agenda, it says budget update fiscal year 2020, 2021. That actually should be budget update fiscal year 2019, 2020. It's the current year's budget that you're updating in there. We are on task to be within budget. At this point within your budget, you should see everything at the 75% level. Anything that's above 75% would raise a concern, other than some of the items we know that are above 75% already, because they are like things like membership dues, which pretty much get paid all at the beginning of the year. So like that line item shouldn't go up again for the rest of the calendar or for the rest of the fiscal year. A couple of other line items are a little bit off, but we've discussed those in the past. The one that you will see is salary line item is slightly above 75%. And that's only because when Ms. Bozard resigned, she had some vacation time that got paid out. So that got paid out. So that got lumped into that beginning part. But because she's not on payroll now, you will see by the time we get to the end of the year, we will actually be under budget for that line item. And we'll have some cost
What about the
savings.
insurance item?
The insurance is one that we covered in a previous meeting where I
That's
just think
right.
when we were merging all of our budget line items together, I think that there was one insurance policy for some reason that wasn't captured as insurance. And when I
Got it.
redid all of our stuff, we had that one up. We captured that. So that is reflected in the new budget. You'll actually see a more realistic number on that one.
Thank you.
So if there's no other questions on that, then we'll move on to current and pending proposals. We had one earlier today for a proposal. The only new thing that we just received an application from the County of Marin on behalf of CSA 29 to do a boundary adjustment. Luckily, even though there are 10 registered voters there, it counts as uninhabited because it's not 12. And so we'll be able to do that with a no protest process, which is great. I'm saying that partly from all those cases because we had been having a discussion about how many people live on 6 parcels of land, and luckily it's under 12. So that will probably in all likelihood be in front of us at our next meeting. I don't see anyone really objecting to this. Every landowner who is impacted by this boundary adjustment has signed a consent form. So they all know what's going on and they all agree that it's the right thing to do. So we'll get into more detail at the next meeting on what all this means, but just wanted to give you a heads up on that. I also will give you a heads up. We have received, finally, you may remember there was that West Marin application that was waiting for a coastal permit. They finally got that coastal permit, so that application is now completed and done. We've submitted it to the county recorder's office, and that one is done. So as far as I'm concerned at this point, we no longer have any active, outstanding applications that were from prior to my time being here. The only application that we have right now that is completed by the commission but waiting for terms of condition to be done is the Tiburon application we got about annexation into Tiburon. They're one of the unincorporated islands, the parcel right next to it. You may remember back in December, we had a pretty good lengthy discussion about all that. So that's the only one that we have that's currently open and waiting for completion. Everything else has been completed and filed away or is going to be coming up at our future meeting. So we're pretty light on applications right now, which is kind of nice. And we'll see how long that lasts. Any questions on current and pending proposals?
And then are you going to take off the closed up items at the end of the fiscal year, or what's
Yes.
your? Okay.
Yeah, what we do is because what I will do is when I send out the proposed budget to all the agencies, I send the work plan and I send a whole bunch of other stuff to them. So I always like to keep all the items we've completed so that they can see that we've done a bunch of work and it's not like, oh, here's just a few things that you have left to do. So I keep those on until the end of the fiscal year, and then So you'll still see them all in June. And then when we get to our August meeting, I wipe out all the completed stuff, all the stuff that no longer needs our attention to it, and take those off, and it will become a much smaller list. And then over the course of the year, it expands again as we get new applications.
Okay.
Okay, so then on to verbal reports, ADP and payroll status update. We, I think, have gotten through most of the issues around ADP and the county transition. There are still a few outstanding things that we're trying to figure out. The shelter-in-place stuff hasn't helped us move things along as quickly as I would have liked to have been at this point. But we are working with the county to try and resolve a couple of the last little things that exist. Once I get that done, I will be able to sit down and revamp our personnel handbook, which has been a long-standing project that we need to do. And once I get that done, I'm going to sit down with county staff who know benefit systems very well and make sure we've got everything correct in our new handbook to address some of the issues that have been coming up based on the ADP transition. We realized, like, for example, COBRA is an issue for us. We use the county's COBRA system, but we're not county employees. And so that when Candace left, that kind of actually raised an issue and a red flag. So we need to address some stuff. We took care of Candace's issue and it's fine. But it was kind of a hodgepodge way of doing it and not the best way for long-term planning purposes. So there'll be some of that stuff. So it'll take me probably a little bit of time to get that to everyone. But I do plan at some point to call a policy committee meeting to really get into the weeds of the new handbook. Kind of been waiting for the ADP stuff to settle in before I got to that point, just to make sure we had everything covered. Other than that, staff is getting paid just fine through the system now. We've got these that side glitches done. We get our paychecks every 2 weeks. They're automatically deposited in our accounts per staff's requests. So that system's working out well. So moving on to updates on MSRs. You may notice tonight's meeting was rather light. Chair McEntee and I purposely did that because we wanted to keep this meeting as short as possible. Granted, we've had some lengthy good discussions. Your next meeting, you should expect to see a lot of MSR SOI items on the agenda. We're going to get back into that swing of things. We kind of delayed anything that wasn't pertinent that had to be done by this meeting to the next meeting. So expect a longer meeting. You will see Novato area spheres of influence is on the agenda. You will see the Tiburon Peninsula MSR up for discussion and approvals. You will see, hopefully, if we can get it done in time, but we should be able to get it done in time, the Ross Valley draft report done, and that should be put out there for public review. We've been able to stay on our targets for our current projects minus the LAFCo commission side of things. That part got a little bit delayed because of our delay in this meeting, but everything else we've been staying on target. We should be out hopefully the end of this month, maybe beginning of next month with the Ross Valley MSR for public review. And we're still working with administrative drafts with the respective agencies. And that side is a little bit slower because of everyone, the people we need to pay attention to this stuff are dealing with something much more relevant than our MSRs. As important as I think our MSRs are, COVID-19 and making sure people stay healthy and everything's going on there is clearly the higher priority. So I'm hoping that they can get to our stuff as quickly as possible. So there might be a slight delay on that side, but we are looking positive to stay on task for getting that one out. We also have, you may remember when we reshuffled some stuff around to help the flood control zones. We have some supplemental reports and those should be coming out soon as well to the San Rafael area one and Novato hopefully not too long thereafter. So we should be getting some stuff out and we should have a lot of MSR work on our next agenda. So just be prepared for a little bit lengthier of a meeting. Hopefully it'll be in person, but if not, I think we're getting this process down pretty well. We'll see how the next one goes if we have public comment and a lot more people showing up, how that works. But that's my updates on the MSRs.
Sorry, Jason, if it does turn out, sorry, I got a puppy here. If it does turn out that the next meeting is by Zoom, we do want to be very careful about making sure that we get the word out to all the community groups. So this is where the commission can be helpful in making sure that Jason and Jaron have a complete list of community groups that need to be contacted. We want to just make sure that we really do a good job of getting the word out on that.
Yes, absolutely agree with you on that.
Okay.
So the next item is LAFCo operations under shelter in place. Our building is a private public building, as in it's privately owned, but it has a bunch of offices in it. Based on the shelter in place orders, our building management has closed our office down to the public. we could still get up into the office, but staff for the most part has been working from home. Jaron doesn't live too far from the office, and so sometimes he does go into the office to do some stuff there and, you know, check the mail, do some stuff like that. I go in less frequently. I tend to go in every 2 weeks or so. I will actually be going in tomorrow because there's several things that come out of this that's easier to do in the office than at home. But we do have, because of the changeover of our phone system and a few other things, I am perfectly capable of working from home every day. I stole my personal printer off my work desk and now have it sitting here on my personal desk at home. So I can write checks. I can do everything from home for the most part. A couple of small things that need to be done at the office. So I go in less frequently, but have been holding meetings and doing stuff via phone and using Zoom and other systems to take care of that process for us. So based on the current orders that just came in, our office will remain closed through May to the general public. Once again, staff as needed will go in. We do have a policy of only one staff person in the office. So like tomorrow when I go in the office, Jaron will not be in the office at all, so we can keep our social distancing and keep each other safe and secure during this process. And then the final item under this is actually one more for Chair McEntee to discuss. It's the discussion of the LAFCo study schedule. She wanted to talk about a few items around that.
Yeah, so since we are in a very unusual time, it might make sense to move around or change the priorities of our study schedule. And I just wanted to, sorry about that, introduce the idea of to get the commission thinking about that. Commissioner Kohler mentioned that not everybody's doing this, but I have definitely been in conversation with several city managers that are looking at consolidations and shared services, and this is something that people have an opportunity to do in a downturn, and is to figure out a more efficient way to deliver government services. So just wanted to raise that with the commission, that this might be a time for us to think about, are there special studies that we might want to do? Do we want to position them in a different way? The countywide fire services study does still seem to be the right next place to go. But this is something that I'd love for everyone to give some thought to, and we could consider making some changes.
All right. That is the end of my executive officer report. You should probably take public comment at this time.
Okay, is there any public comment?
Madam Chair, we have no emails and no raised hands from the public.
Okay. All righty. Any further comments from the commission on that? Okay. All right. So then we will go ahead and adjourn to closed session. I'm just going to ask for a little 10-minute break here to settle my children and my puppy here, and then we will go into our Zoom closed session.
We have some questions. Let's just make sure we have questions on how to get to closed session before we actually people leave.
Okay.
A couple things too, Sashi, this is Craig.
Okay, Vice Chair Murray.
One, just in terms of our scheduling of items, I think as a commission, we need to do a legal review. That's kind of under our purview. So maybe working with Jason to make sure that gets scheduled. And then I want to thank Lou, myself. We had our Marin County Special Districts Association executive.
Commissioner Murray, I'm sorry to interrupt you. I think what you're doing is commission announcements and requests, which will come after the closed session is done.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, okay, folks. To be continued.
Okay.
Does everyone have the link to the agenda or for the Zoom meeting that Mala set up? It should be in a calendar event that she sent you. I want to make sure everyone has that before you leave here. Save this link because you will come back to this spot when the closed session is done.
Sashi, did you want to start this at 8:30? You talked about a 10-minute break.
Yes, we'll go ahead and 8:30 would be great.
Okay, thank you.
See y'all when you get back. I'll be here waiting for you.
All right, we'll adjourn to closed session. Thank you very much. All right, we'll return to open session, and we gave direction. We gave the performance evaluation, and we gave direction to labor negotiators. Mala, is that appropriate?
That's correct.
Okay, great. I know Vice Chair Murray has something he'd like to do in commissioner announcements and requests.
So one of the things that we're tasked with is legal review, annual legal review. So just to put that on the schedule between our chair and our executive officer. The second item is, so one of the things we're trying to do here in Marin is to form a Marin County Special Districts Association. It's been about 10 years. It's going to help LAFCo. It's going to help all our special districts in Marin operate better, communicate just like county and city levels of government do. So as I was mentioning earlier, Lou and I serve on the executive committee, and we did meet at the TAM Community Service District via Zoom, and we did two significant things. One, we signed the bylaws, and the other thing is we now are affiliated. We had signed our affiliation agreement. So that goes up to the CSDA board on June 11th for their adoption, and then we'll be official at that point. And our next meeting is July 7th. That's the end of my report.
Good job, Craig.
Great, Craig. Great to hear that. And just to clarify, Commission Vice Chair Murray, I think, was asking for a review of Commission Council. Since our two direct reports are the Executive Officer and the Commission Council, it would be appropriate to also do a review of the Commission Council. So we'll work on that for the future. Thank you, Vice Chair Murray. Any other Commissioner announcements and requests?
Jason here, just for clarification purposes, for legal counsel review, is there an immediate need to do it at our June meeting, or is it okay if we bump it to August? I'm just looking at calendars here, and June's going to be an extremely busy meeting, so I don't want to add something on there if it can wait.
Wait's good, Jason.
Okay.
Scheduling.
Okay, great. If there are no other Commissioner announcements and requests, we will adjourn to our next meeting, which is Thursday, June 11th, 2020 at 7 p.m., which will either be a live meeting at Marin Clean Energy or will be another Zoom meeting, and that information will be to come. Thank you very much. Thanks for sticking it out, everyone.
Thank
Stay
you.
safe, everyone.
Thank you. Bye.
Thanks, Nashi.
Bye.
Good night,
Bye,
everybody.
everybody.
Night.